But I want to mention also in the area of health, right now we spend $1 trillion a year, more than that actually as taxpayers, plus $1 trillion as consumers. So it's a $2 trillion system. But here's the rub. 75% of those healthcare dollars are spent on chronic diseases. They're spent treating chronic diseases, which are avoidable, preventable completely at a tiny fraction of the cost. And the happy story is that we prevent those diseases by doing the same things that green our economy. So when we have a healthy local food system, and we have an active transportation system, and we're not poisoning people with air and water and consumer product pollution, then guess what? At least 50%, maybe 75% of those preventable conditions go away. So that's another way in which Medicare for All pays for itself. Together with the Green New Deal, we have basically a health bonanza. When Cuba lost its oil supply, what happened in Cuba, you may know, is that they had to quickly get out the draft animals and put people to work, raising food, and they had to get out their bicycles and their buses and have a public and active transportation system. But what's little known is what happened to their health in the process. And remember that their economy is crashing at this time. Their GDP is collapsing. But ironically, their health improves, and they haven't spent a penny on it, right? So with the $2 trillion healthcare system, we can't get anywhere near what happened to them. Their death rate from diabetes plummeted by 50%. Their death rate from heart disease and stroke went down 30%. And their all-cause mortality went down 20%. This just happened from getting off oil. So, and we can't do it, you know, with a $2 trillion system. We can't even begin to achieve what they got with $0. So it's just important to remember this is another way that this whole system pays for itself. It doesn't cost us anything in the long run. That much about, the other thing I'll mention about healthcare under Medicare for All system is that it also stabilizes medical inflation, which is something you know that is big and much bigger than inflation in the rest of the economy, maybe 5%. Some years in Massachusetts, I know it's been 10%. So medical inflation is going like that, but under single-payer systems, it basically levels off. It just doesn't happen. And some economists predict that this will save us trillions of dollars in the national treasury over the course of a decade. So when people say, oh, Medicare for All, what a great idea, but we can't afford it. In fact, we can't afford not to do it. It's a money generator. A couple other quick ones. It's time to bring the troops home from these illegal and immoral wars. Yeah. Even Obama's promise that he was going to bring the troops out in 2014, well, it doesn't look so secure now, right? I mean, because he just promised Afghanistan that we'd be there for another 10 years till 2024 defending them. So I wouldn't hold my breath that the troops are coming home, or say that they're not going to be swapped out for just a whole lot of drones that will be flying in from, you know, who knows where, Somalia or Iraq, probably, or who knows. But clearly when a president has to sneak in under cover of darkness to make the announcement that we're winning, it's not so believable. And when the troops had to withdraw from Iraq under cover of darkness without having announced the date because they would be ambushed in the process, this was not a victory. So, you know, it's clear that our foreign policy going forward needs to be based on human rights and international law, not on the flexing of military muscles. So we can scale back this $1 trillion a year budget for the military-industrial security complex, which is militarizing our security, and in fact turning our security into a police state here at home. That's where a lot of those dollars are going. Those dollars will be far more productive in terms of creating a livable and secure economy than they are in the war machine and the security apparatus. They will be much more productive when we take those dollars out of the war budget and put them into our domestic budget here at home. So it's time to do that. I'll mention also immigrant rights. This is another area where the president has just really distinguished himself, went far beyond George Bush, has deported 1 million immigrants, under the guise of there being criminal, but in fact these programs do not deport criminals or their traffic stop violators. It's that level of criminality. It's been devastating actually to the immigrant community and often to our economies, our local community economies, which very much depend on the contribution of immigrants to our communities and our workforce. So we're saying it's time to stand up. People who look like me, and though most of us in this room, are immigrants here. Most of us in this country are immigrants, with the exception of the original settlers, the Native Americans, and then the slaves who were brought over here, not by their free will. But the rest of us were all immigrants who came here, and that is the strength and the diversity and the richness of American society and economy. And we need to be welcoming the immigrant members of our community and establishing a legal path to citizenship for them and put an end to this witch hunt that the president has been carrying out against the And then last but not least, marijuana is a drug which is dangerous because it's illegal. It's not illegal because it's dangerous. The biggest public health problem with marijuana is the underground illegal drug culture that surrounds it, and we can do away with that with the stroke of a pen. And in fact, one of the commitments I've made as president, if I have the honor of serving, is in fact to list marijuana and hemp according to the science. Science should be driving the substances that are scheduled, that are controlled. And there is no scientific reason to be listing marijuana and hemp as illegal and dangerous substances. So they should basically be removed from the list, and the president has the power to so instruct the Food and Drug Administration on day one. So tell your friends in the marijuana community that legalization is essentially as simple as a stroke of the pen in the voting booth in November. Yeah. It's essentially on the ballot already. As we get on the ballot, legalization is on the ballot. Which brings me to, well, first, this question. This is an agenda that the American public really supports by large numbers in polls and in just talking to people out on the street. One of the big reasons we don't have it is because we are told, it's really drummed into us that we got to vote against ourselves. We've got to vote for the lesser evil, and it would be very dangerous to go into the voting booth and vote for what you wanted. Well, surprise, surprise, this is what corporate America wants you to think, and the corporate-sponsored political parties put enormous amounts of money into drilling that mythology and that fear campaign into us. But, it's nice now, because that fear campaign has been really very explicit over the last 10 years. So you can just point out to people and ask them, so how is this lesser evil thing working out for you? and to say that what we see over the last 10 years, we got 10 years worth of data now that shows that silence is not an effective political strategy. And in fact, that the politics of fear has actually delivered all those things that we were afraid of. All those things you were supposed to be quiet so that we could avoid the expanding war, the trashing of our civil liberties, the bailouts for Wall Street, the growing gap between rich and poor, offshoring of our jobs, free trade agreements, all those things that we've gotten in spades from the Democratic Party as well as the Republicans. So, it's time to stand up and cancel that politics of fear and answer it with the politics of courage. And in fact, looking back over the history of social progress, how is it that we made, how is it that we moved forward? We had basically social movements working together with independent political parties. In the abolition of slavery, we had the Liberty Party. In the women's right to vote, we had the Women's Party. in acquiring the right to unionize, the 40-hour work week, safe workplaces, child labor laws. We had the socialists, the labor, and the progressive parties. And what the small parties have always done is articulate the vision, the agenda, and make the demands. Because as Frederick Douglass says, power concedes nothing without a demand, never has, never will. That's what our campaign is all about. It's about bringing those demands, those solutions, if you will, and driving them into the public dialogue. So we need to redefine the win. They're trying to define the win in such a way as to discourage us, and it's fundamentally a psychological war. It's psychological warfare that we are engaged in. So it's really important to acknowledge that the win is not this artificial win that they say it is. They say the only win is to get to the White House. And maybe we will, or maybe we will in the next election, or maybe we will in this election. I wouldn't rule it out. Think Tahrir Square and think Tunisia. Whoever would have predicted what was going to happen there. But the point is, it's a win no matter how we do it. If we stand up, whether we are 2% or 52% of the vote, it's a whole new ballgame. The minute we regain our political voice and our political courage, we move these solutions forward to where they have a life of their own. They are, the establishment is really in a pickle if these issues get on the table. They don't want them on the table because the public supports them. So simply by getting them on the table, we begin to win, and we also build the base for this movement for economic and political democracy. So I invite you to be the campaign. Don't just vote for the campaign, be the campaign. Join the team. If you go to the website, it's just jillstein.org. I think there's some flyers out there as well, and some other campaign stuff, materials. But by going to the website, if you sign up, you sign up as a volunteer, you will get the newsletter. At the very least, you can take the time, it's the flick of a finger, to forward that newsletter to all of your contacts, because chances are they're into what we're talking about as well. And what we're talking about in the campaign is what you're talking about as the Green Party here in Washington State and nationally. If you do social media, get on social media, because it really is the powerhouse of political change. Look what happened not only in the Middle East, but here on the SOPA bill. The SOPA bill, was full speed ahead until people found out about it, and then they stopped it. And we have the power to do that in this election. If we activated simply the students and the marijuana advocates, that's a win. I mean, we can win the race right there. Add to that the peace community or the 50 million people who don't have health care. We're going to turn the White House into a greenhouse. This election. So this is about all of us standing up and standing together and seizing this moment to use this election to turn the breaking point into a tipping point and start to take back the democracy and the promise of a peaceful, just, free future that really is within our reach. Thank you so much.